Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And I have to tell you that I'm so pleased I'm not a youngster today. I mean, I've had a great life, and 8 years of my life was spent at boarding school. And at junior school, I was at Cornwallis, and at senior school, I was at Michael House. That covered my life from about the age of 6 to about the age of 15. And that's when I passed matric. Now, I have to tell you that I didn't have an easy time at boarding school. Yes, I know it was back in the 1960s going through to the early 1970s, but I did not have a good time. I grew up in Tanzania. I was sent down to South Africa to get an education because there was no education system in East Africa. And I only went home 3 times a year. I never saw my parents for the rest of the time because they were up in Dar es Salaam or Iringa. And I had a very, very lonely 8 years. And what didn't help was that when I was at Cornwallis, when I was a 6-year-old, I was bullied mercilessly by other kids who were like a year older in the school. And I was called a Bobbejaan. That was my nickname at Cornwallis, Bobbejaan. Yeah, baboon. And you know, I copped it sweet. I guess because it's white on white, it can't be racist. But look, I was called some of the most terrible names you can think of at Cornwallis. And of course we had the cane back then, so you know things weren't easy. And then when I went to Michael House, first year I was a CAC. I had to serve the prefects. And we got black marks if we didn't do things perfectly. And if we got 10 black marks from our prefect, we had to go to a place called Scully's where we got caned by the head boy in our house. And there were boys in our school, our house, which was Baines, being caned every night by this head boy. And at Michael House, because I became a very, very good runner, it's the only thing I got right at boarding school. Okay, let's get over it. I had all the long distance records. The only thing I could do right was run. So you know what they called me? They called me Bushman, and to be a little bit more unpleasant, they called me Bosvark. Those were my nicknames at Michael House. Now, that's quite, I wasn't alone. Just about every kid in the school was bullied verbally and intimidated. And you know what it was? It was character building. You literally had to fight for yourself. But you look at the boarding schools today, now with Black Lives Matter, everything has become racial because you've got people with different color skins. This is where I think the world has got it so wrong. I think the world has gone beyond that point of actually having these biases against skin color. I mean, I certainly don't. I certainly have an issue where you've got incompetent and corrupt people in power. Absolutely I do. But let me tell you what's happening in the private schools of South Africa right now. This is an article from News 24, 10th of June. Now, I happen to know a little bit about this because I was speaking to the deputy rector of Michael House only 2 days ago by email. And I know that Michael House is currently setting up a policy to make sure that there is no racism in Michael House because they have now got kids of different color at the school, which I think really, you know, it shouldn't be needed. I come back to the point that when I was at school, I was called a Bobbejaan at Cornwallis for 4 years, and I was called Bushman and Bosvark. A Bosvark is a bush pig, for those who don't understand Afrikaans. because I could run at Michael House. Yeah, it wasn't pleasant, but so what? It's part of being in a boarding school. But this is the latest news, hot off the press. Top Midlands private schools are reeling after being called out on social media for racism. In the wake of the global Black Lives Matter movement triggered by the killing of George Floyd in the US, a social media furor has laid bare the experience of black African pupils at some of the country's most celebrated private schools at the hands of staff as well as fellow pupils. The storm started with an anti-racism account, Your Silence We Amplify, which was created on Instagram. The account, which has 180 posts and 10,000 followers, was set up last week for current and former pupils of Herschel Girls High School in Cape Town. But it quickly spread and prompted hashtag denouncing racism at schools across the country, including Pietermaritzburg, which has a glittering reputation as home to the highest concentration of elite private schools in the country. Well, News 24, you got that wrong. It's not actually Pietermaritzburg, it's in Natal, Midlands. More than 40 current and former pupils of St. Anne's Diocesan College have collectively written a public document titled Record of Racism at St. Anne's, which details their experiencing dating from 2014, accusing teachers and pupils of discriminatory behavior. The group are expected to submit a letter of demand for transformation to the school on Wednesday. Now, I got an email from Michael House I think it was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday. I got an email from Michael House yesterday. Let me read that to you, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about that and then get back to this article about racism at boarding schools. Okay, this is a statement sent out by the rector of Michael House, Anthony Clark, on the 10th of June. And it was sent to me personally. It was sent to all old boys and boys from the rector of Michael House. And it reads as follows. Over the past few days, I've met on several occasions with a number of our senior boys to discuss their reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement. And, emanating from this, I've become aware of how deeply hurt, distressed, and isolated a number of black boys and others of colour have felt by incidents of racism which they have experienced here at Michael House. As the rector, I wish to say how very sorry I am that this has been the reality for some black boys and others of colour, both past and present. I acknowledge that we should have moved with much greater alacrity towards creating a safer space for all boys and to establish a mechanism for achieving this. Clark goes on to say, Michael House is unequivocally condemning any form and all forms of racism, and we deeply regret where it has occurred in the past and present. In order to demonstrate that this message is sincere, as a first step, we will immediately establish a transformation committee which will comprise members of the board, old boys staff and boys to oversee and implement an urgent drive to developing our ethos in such a way that all are able to identify with it. This committee will be charged, amongst other things, with establishing a new anti-racism policy and revisiting some of the rules or conventions within the school which have led to a feeling of unfairness or discrimination. Members of staff on this committee will be in a position to provide strong support for boys on an ongoing basis, and I will meet regularly with them so that I may be alert to any issues which are developing or are in need of immediate attention. In the very near future, hopefully tomorrow evening, we will arrange a webinar to be attended by old boys and current boys, chaired by old boy Ray Mkulizi. At this, boys will be able to discuss issues of concern without the presence of staff, and their views will be collated and presented to the chairman of the board and me for our attention. We recognize that our journey of transformation is only at its beginning, that we could have been further along the road, and that there needs to be much greater focus given to this matter immediately and on an ongoing basis. And then it's signed off by Anthony Clark, the rector. Okay, so this is happening right now at Michael House. They're going to hold a webinar, apparently this week, where people will put forward their grievances about how they've been treated. I go back to when I was a little boy, 6 years old at Cornwallis, going up to when I was 15 years old at Michael House. I was verbally abused every day of my life. But of course, it wasn't a racist attack. It was more a vindictive attack on me personally. As I said, it made me a stronger person. And now what's happening is because you got people of color in these boarding schools, all of a sudden that culture, which had been going for generations in Michael House, and everybody who's been at Michael House knows what I'm talking about. Now all of a sudden it's a racist thing. But let's get back to this report from News 24. Okay, continuing with this report, or this article. Pupils said they were called derogatory names, including the K word and N word, and were excluded or singled out due to race or religion, bullied based on accent or appearance, and treated differently in terms of disciplinary measures. Now, I have to tell you, here's a wake-up call. That's exactly what happened to me. One of the big problems I had was that I was being flown in from East Africa, and the boys in South Africa didn't like that. I used to be told every day to go home, go back to East Africa. You know, that's the sort of verbal abuse I grew to get used to. Because I had no other choice. I was stuck in that environment. And as I say, we had no way of complaining or doing anything. The masters would have laughed at us. They said, look, this is boarding school, for God's sake. Grow a backbone. But you can see what's now happening because of Black Lives Matter. Let's continue. The pupils claim that while the prejudices were reported numerous times, the alleged perpetrators were never held to account. Former St. Anne's pupil Katakili Dakili, who spoke to the witness on Tuesday, recalled an incident in 2016 when one of the girls told an African Michael House boy that she would rather die than intimately interact with a black boy. Now, you know, you're talking about kids, for God's sake. I don't get this. I just don't get this. I'm sorry. I just don't get this. Anyway, it goes on to say, the incident received quite a bit of attention, and the black girls were outraged and hurt that a fellow student could hold such racially prejudiced thoughts. Datkili, who matriculated in 2018, added, while we reported the incident, we were told that no one has a right to be angry, as all of us have lied or sinned in some way. Well, let me assure you, I can guarantee you in Michael House that if I was a black fella and the CACs, the first years, came in, I would be abusing them even if they had a white skin, because that's the tradition within the school. But now what they're doing is they're kind of putting in all these barriers. It's going to totally undermine the actual the whole way the school operates is going to be damaged by this. It's actually very sad that this Black Lives Matter is having this impact on really good schools where, you know, kids are smart. They know what they're doing. But now you're going to have a prefect who uses a word that a first-year black boy doesn't like, and that prefect might find himself being expelled. This is how ridiculous this situation has become. You know, it's, as I said, it's time people grew a backbone. Everybody in Michaelhouse, everybody in Hilton, everybody in St. Anne's. You ask Fee, the white Zulu, she'll tell you how she was abused and basically called different words all the way through her life at St. Anne's. That's what it was like. That's what boarding school is like when you've got young people growing up. They can be very cruel. It's got nothing to do with racial color. It's just them being young boys and young girls, and just that's how it worked. Let me continue. A current St. Anne's pupil who remained anonymous said she had been picked on by a member of staff since grade 8. The pupil recalled how the staff member once called her black friend that one. She said while they complained, nothing has been done. St. John Diocesan School has also come under fire. Commenting on the school's Facebook page, Mbalele Majola said, St. John's did wrong by us in so many ways and on so many levels. High school was a painful experience because of the way we were treated because of our skin color. And again, I reject that last comment about because of our skin color. It's because that is the culture of these schools. It's kind of putting you in your place because you got to learn that you don't rule the roost. And that's how you grow in a boarding school. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to destroy that fabric, which is like the foundation of the culture of boarding schools. Anyway, let's continue. St. John's pupil Nokwazi Makachwa said, "You'd think a school as beautiful and seemingly progressive as this would have had less for us to deal with, but no. If all the black old girls were to be gathered in one room to tell our stories, I guarantee that the first thing that we would do is cry. You put us through so much pain." Well, I could say the same thing. Seriously. Because I often used to cry when I was going to sleep at Michaelhouse. You have absolutely no idea. But as I said, we had a backbone in those days, you know. It made us stronger, it made us better people when we came out of school. The subtle hints of racism that some of us felt on the regular, how we had to manage our hair versus the white girls, lovely how they were allowed to even colour their hair as long as it was not far from the natural colour, a joke. Makachwa recalled how girls in a higher grade found it acceptable to use the K word. Commenting on the Wickham Collegiate Facebook page, Chichi Nessa Nama Malama said she had also experienced racism from a member of staff. Malama said, "I suggest you sit down with every girl of colour currently at TWC and allow them to give their account or sentiments of racism at your institution and address those concerns." She said in her experience, it is the members of staff who largely had a problem. Sharing her experience at Epworth School, Lindiwe Lee Fancyface, wow, that's a good name, said, "That is the worst private school I have been to. The racism there is disgusting. I would never take my child to any private school in the Midlands." Dave Argili, the St. Anne's principal, told the witness yesterday the school had been involved in meetings with current pupils and staff and has reached out to a number of old girls who have posted comments. In a statement shared on the school website, he said, "Our St. Anne's transformation journey is not a new one. We have sincerely attempted to be open to criticism, to be courageous in bringing about change, and to eradicate injustices of which we may previously have been unaware." He added, "Racism is ubiquitous, and to suggest that members of our community are never guilty of racist behavior or that implicit bias does not impact on our actions or decision-making at St. Anne's would be naive. Furthermore, the value of admirable policies is diminished every time an individual experiences a contradiction thereof. Sue Tasker, the Wickham Collegiate principal, said, "The Wickham Collegiate strongly condemns any form of discrimination, including racism. Any formal complaints that are brought to my attention are dealt with immediately, according to the school's code of conduct and anti-racism policy." Tasker confirmed that the school had received allegations of racism in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. She said, "The school received allegations of racism and we take those allegations very seriously." Tasker said once lockdown restrictions are over, the school will once again invite external facilitators with expertise in the field of diversity and inclusion to run workshops with girls and staff. She said, "The school will also ensure that we provide a safe place for everyone to report incidents of discrimination, including racism, so that we can move forward in a constructive and positive way." Head of Marketing at St. John's, Sarah Cole Edwards, said a number of old girls have come forward to detail their experiences of racist behavior and attitudes while at St. John's. He said, "The girls speak of systemic racism in the use of words, actions, and behaviors of other girls and staff. Many girls also feel that complaints raised in the past weren't dealt with." Cole Edwards said at this stage the school is gathering information and looking at patterns and behaviors that require change. She said, "We are setting up a group of stakeholders from all areas of the school to take this investigation forward and to make sure that meaningful and lasting change results from these complaints and shared experiences." Alan van Black, the St. Giles principal, said the school has not received any allegations of racism. Michael House spokesperson Murray Witherspoon said the school has also not received any allegations of racism. He said, "None yet, although given the very current circumstances we are prepared to engage openly with any member of our community who expresses concerns over our endeavours around inclusivity." He said Michael House views any act or sentiment of intolerance in a very serious light. Any member of the extended Michael House community who behaves in a spirit contradictory to our values of equality and inclusivity will be subject to our censure. Members of our immediate community of boys and staff would be subject to a strict disciplinary procedure, Witherspoon said. Hilton College spokesperson Peter Storar acknowledged that the school has not been immune to racism. Storar said, "Racism is part of a group of offences which the school classifies as our most serious zero-tolerance misdemeanours, meaning that boys can be expelled and staff can be dismissed on a first offence basis." As I said at the very beginning of this video, I'm so pleased that I'm not a young man going through school, boarding school right now. You know, I had to take it on the chin, but I did, and I'm proud of that. I didn't go around bleating, bullying. I just had to cope with it. The world has become so soft today, so inequitable. It's quite extraordinary. Anyway, Storer said, in the most recent example, 2 years ago, a pupil was withdrawn from the school as a result of overt racist behaviour. Hilton still has a long road to travel before we can claim to be a truly representative and inclusive school, but we are proud of the fact that so many in our community feel comfortable to openly engage with each other about this vitally important topic and have committed to creating a shared and inclusive future together. Vicky Crooks, head of marketing at Epworth, said in 2017 the school formalized an ongoing program to allow for conversations and discussion around all forms of discrimination, social awareness and justice. Crooks said, "We also have a transformation, diversity and inclusivity task team comprising all school stakeholders. So, things are changing in the boarding schools, guys. That's a reality of the situation. Look, I know they've changed dramatically from when I was a boarding school lodger, but, you know, I think one of the most important things that I learnt going through Cornwallis and Michael House was respect. Because in your first year, in either of those schools, and Hilton College, wherever you went, it was the same thing. In your first year at one of those schools, you were the lowest form of life. Okay, that's how it was. You were the lowest form of life. In fact, at Michael House, you were called a CAC, which stands for the yolk of an egg. You hadn't even been born. And from there, when you came back after your first year, you moved up a rung. And you could now start taking the mickey out of the new CACs. And so it progressed until year 4, when you could take the mickey out of most of the people in the house. You know, you could call them names, you could abuse them, and they would just have to cop it sweet, because there was respect and there was a peer system in the school. I know it sounds really harsh, but that was the reality of boarding school back then. Now, what this new anti-racism policy does is it kind of makes a person of color who arrives at a school on the first day, he can make an allegation against a prefect who's been there for 4 years, suggesting that he called him a naughty word, and that could impact on that person's career or his schooling at a boarding school in South Africa. This is the dangerous ground that these schools are walking on, because we've had the situation just in the last couple of weeks where a senior police official was accused of using the K word. Remember that? And she didn't. And two subordinate police who she was chastising claimed that she used the K word, and she was nearly fired. But there happened to be a witness to that conversation, a third person, another black person, who said that she never used the K word. But she was taken before the tribunal, or police tribunal, expecting to be fired. And if it hadn't been for that third person who was present in the conversation, who said, no, she never actually said that, she never used the K word, she would have lost her job. And these two subordinate black police would have been then justified. They would be all cool, even though it never happened. This is the dangerous ground boarding schools are walking on. They are going to completely destroy that respect mechanism that builds up by progressing through the school. It's very, very sad. I understand the complications they're having, but it would be really good if the world realized that we have basically gone beyond the issues of 20 years ago. And I could go on about this for hours, because this was 8 years of my life. I know what I'm talking about. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there, but please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. If you're from a boarding school in South Africa and you know what I'm talking about, or you differ with my point of view, please put your comments down below this video. Let's have a discussion about this, because I think it's horribly damaging to the culture that these boarding schools have created. The whole idea of, for example, my old boarding school, Michael House, is let us make you men. And you're made men because of your experiences and because you have to take it on the chin. Now, when you come through a school where, there's no challenges, everything is kind of perfect, and there's no respect for the prefect when you're in year 1, you're kind of destroying something really valuable and unique that the boarding schools offer. All right, I've burbled on enough. Please like this video, please share this video, and above all, please stay safe.